Joining us now, Julian Assange. Mr. Assange, good to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, lawyer. I'm doing all right, considering.
Well, let's talk about. First of all, I want to get into the Vault 7. I know there's a big Showtime documentary coming out this summer, but given what you know about U.S. methods and intelligence gathering, how do you see this change, this kind of 180-degree change on the part of Donald Trump from the campaign Trump to the President Trump on the issue of foreign policy, at least?
Well, you can say on one hand, there's a question which everyone is kind of interested in, which is how long does it take for the intelligence sector, the deep state, to digest the president that isn't pre-digested. Normally, presidents entering into power in the United States, and it's also often true in other countries, come to a harmony with the most powerful factions in their nation, and that includes intelligence services, arms contractors, etc. Donald Trump was different. He wasn't pre-harmonized with that lot, and as he's gone into power, he's struggled against them, and now perhaps he's developed a compromise where he's not going to remove what was their most important mission, they thought, which is their mission to overthrow the government in Syria. It's the largest budgetary largest budgetary project that the CIA has. The other interpretation is that we don't know exactly what the evidence is, and that's part of the problem. Was there a genuine chemical weapons attack authorized by Bashar al-Assad? Maybe even the Russians agreed with it as well. It's quite hard to imagine why you would do that at this time. There's no need for him to do it. It's an extraordinary risk, but I guess it's theoretically possible, in which case it would demand a strong response. What it doesn't demand is going into Syria and overthrowing a government without any plan, because if the government of Bashar al-Assad, a secular government, a non-Muslim government, is removed, then there'll simply be a fight with all the different insurgents in the area, fight for influence between Turkey, UAE, Israel, Jordan, Qatar, the French, the US, the UK, and there'll be massacres of all the minority groups.
Well, and I think, again, the administration said within 48 hours or 24 hours that Assad was responsible for this, that the certification that the chemical weapons had been disposed of during the Obama administration was obviously wrong. They hadn't been. They said they had video of satellite imagery and video of Syrian planes taking off from the base that was hit and then dropping, I guess, the bombs on the innocent population. And the phrase we kept hearing is incontrovertible evidence. And if you even raise a question of this, you'll be accused of siding with Assad. And I mean, obviously, I do not side with Assad, but we have to remember that everybody thought Iraq had WMD too, and everyone just went along with WMD. So the thing that Rand Paul was saying in the Senate last week is, would like to see this evidence before you start sending in the cruise missiles. Could we see some of the evidence? And it doesn't look like, as far as I can tell, that the Senate has seen that evidence. At least I don't think they have.
Well, look, it doesn't pass the smell test from a who benefits point of view. Now, sometimes people do stupid things, so it is theoretically possible that Assad has done it. But unfortunately, the CIA has no credibility in this area. Its alliances that it has formed with UAE, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, etc., to overthrow the Assad government will be significantly compromised if the mission to overthrow that government is stopped. So that there's enormous individual, institutional, and relational reasons to engage in such a fabrication. So until we see public evidence, we have to simply say alleged. And I'm quite disturbed to see the number of journalists in the New York Times and elsewhere simply saying that there is such an attack. That's something that the U.S. administration is alleging. We don't know how good that evidence is. We know in the past that Turkey has engaged in false flag attacks. We know, and it's completely accepted, that al-Nusra and ISIS have had engaged in multiple, I think a figure of about 50 or 60 was reported in the New York Times, chemical weapons attacks themselves over the last 3 years. So there's a problem when the administration says, you just have to accept our word on this, because in the past, the word of intelligence agencies has not been reliable, and there's so many players and so much power at stake that even if the CIA is being honest in this time around, has it been fooled by these other players such as Turkey or Israel? They're perfectly capable of producing quite elaborate hoaxes.
There's been so much speculation and accusation leveled at you, and we'll just focus on the ties that are alleged that you have to Russia or a state actor, and whether you got the WikiLeaks treasure trove of information from someone representing a state actor or not, and that's used to discredit you along with other things repeatedly from both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, people in office, people out of office. How do you respond to that? I mean, I know you're not going to give up your sources, and journalists don't give up their sources, but how can you grapple with that? And how could you ever shake that off if you can't really reveal who your sources are? How are you able to do that?
It's a difficulty where you have to protect your sources, and therefore there's a vacuum. People, for various political reasons or institutional reasons, can say anything about the vacuum, and that's better than what you've said, which is nothing. So that's just a problem with for investigative journalism. But let's kind of look at WikiLeaks as an institution. Mm-hmm. We have a 10-year perfect record for accuracy of our publications. Perfect. No one is denying that. So when we talk about credibility, I would put that credibility against any news institution, frankly, in the world.
Oh, so many of them got it wrong. So many of them have gotten so much wrong over the past. I mean, let's just say for the past 2 years. Forget the past 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah, not just got it wrong, but deliberately.
Or colluding with one party or another. What about WikiLeaks information on how Russia operates? Can we be looking forward to getting some WikiLeaks dumps on other major actors who have enormous military resources, enormous deep state presence of their own? And I used to live in the former Soviet Union, and I still love walking by the old KGB building, the FSB building, and but we know that still operates today. Different methods, different goals to some extent. But are we going to have a WikiLeaks dump on Putin?
Well, we've already published more than 800,000 documents about Russia and Putin. Probably 5-6 of those are highly critical. A number of books have come out of those documents, including Mafia State. Not a particularly good book, but one that makes the case reasonably credibly that there's a lot of corruption in Russia, and it's based on our material. There's been a lot of lawsuits against Russia that have been based on what we've published. From China, we've published a lot about their censorship system, and that has led to some of that censorship system being rolled back or not being rolled out as fast. Sometimes they wait until the political turmoil has died away. But to understand that, most countries are fairly provincial. They're concerned about their politicians and their system, and the US is no different. So is there lots of discussion in the United States about our publications on Russia? No, because Americans are not interested in that. About our publications on China? No, because they're not interested in that. We've published more than 2.3 million documents from the Syrian government, including Bashar al-Assad's personal emails and the emails with his translator and his wife, and what kind of iTunes songs he likes to listen to, etc. So
that's not as interesting as some of the stuff you published about the U.S., though, right? I mean, iTunes is kind of fun, Julian, but it's not. That's not the kind of stuff we want. We want to know. We want to know, for instance, what Russia really wants in Eastern Europe. I mean, I'm not, as you know, I'm not a neoconservative. I'm not about to be one of these people saying we should go to war for Latvia. That's not me. But also, I would like to know a lot more about what Putin does to his political enemies. We know some of them end up dead, but what other ways do we track Putin? And again, I'm asking the questions I think just regular folks listening would ask of what WikiLeaks does.
My opinion, as I said, we've published hundreds of thousands of documents. But if you're asking what my opinion is as an analyst on on Russia in general, well, I think we should keep things in perspective. Russians are good at making noise, and others are good at arms companies and so on at instrumentalizing that Russian trait to make Russia seem a lot bigger than what it is. And frankly, it's my opinion that Putin really likes that. And me and my staff, frankly, we're extremely annoyed about Putin getting any credit for our incredible scoops about the Democratic Party during the election process. Russia has a GDP smaller than that of South Korea.
Tiny compared to China. Yeah, well, tiny compared to China, tiny compared to the United States.
It's almost an irrelevant state compared to China. But people are not willing to securitize China publicly. Why are they not willing to do that? China's too big. China has so much import. There are so many economic connections. People effectively financially incentivized to not criticize China.
Julian, hold that thought. I know I want to hear more on this. Hold that thought. We're going to try to hold you over, which we don't usually do to hour, but if you can stay, that would be great. I want to get into more of the China question. Julian Assange is with us. Questions for him, 855-40-LAURA. That's 855-40-LAURA, the founder of WikiLeaks. Don't go away. We're going to continue with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Some call him a traitor. Others call him a savior for having revealed just how our government, could perhaps be spying on her own people, and a lot more. So we'll take your calls for Mr. Assange coming up. Also, my appearance on Fox and Friends on the war footing that we seem to be on now, a long way from America First. I want you to go to our Facebook page, watch the Fox and Friends. We continue with Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Of course, is holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, and he has been there for years. And he grew up in Australia and went to school in Queensland and is a computer programmer and has won a bunch of journalism awards. Got mucked up in something in Sweden, and that was a big saga with two women accused him of sexual. One woman changed her story and said she was some lesser charge of rape, and then another one said, and the government tried to claim some molestation charge. They tried to do the interviews on the telephone with the prosecutor while he was out of the country because he didn't think he was going to be treated fairly, and he's still getting asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Mr. Assange, we continue with you on that, but I want to get into the Vault 7. But doesn't the statute of limitations on the Swedish charges run out in 2020? Is that right? Is that how long it?
I haven't been charged with anything at any time.
I mean, I meant I amend my remarks. The possibility of being able to charge you runs out in 2020, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, sure, but the situation is entirely political. So it's a political situation. There are 2 UN rulings from last year that I'm being illegally detained, should be immediately released and should be compensated. So far, the states of Sweden and the UK are not obeying those UN rulings. But it's quite interesting. I mean, just some of your listeners might be interested, to be an individual and to sue 2 states and win at the United Nations. So, and then they refuse to implement the decision so far. I mean, clearly they're going to. It's just a matter of permitting them to save face in the result of the loss.
Do you think that the United States is putting pressure on Sweden, and even your home country of Australia is putting pressure on Sweden?
That's well documented historically. The United States put pressure. It came out in the Snowden leaks that the United States put pressure on U.S. allies to cancel my passport, to make sure I couldn't move, to prosecute me on other on anything actually.
How do you get through your day? How do you get through your day there? I'm curious how you spend your days. I mean, obviously you're online. You're doing WikiLeaks. You're sifting through all this information you get and analyzing it. But I mean, you must go crazy inside the same place for as long as you've been in there. Yeah,
I've been detained without charge for 7 years in this country, about just over 4.5 years in this embassy. Yeah, it's pretty outrageous. There's a huge surveillance operation around the embassy. They have robot cameras. They've done deals with the buildings around the embassy, which are owned by the sovereign fund of Qatar, to put surveillance teams in there. There's surveillance on the street as well, plainclothes surveillance. There's quite a lot of irritation within London. The government chose to waste all that money in that way. And about a year and a half ago, because of all the complaints in this country, they decided to classify the budget. So it came out that they had already reached $20-something million on the budgetary spend against trying to surveil me, and then there was a lot of outrage, and then they classified the budget. So we don't know how much they spent since then.
And there, as far as you know, there's an ongoing U.S. investigation still against you?
The court documents this year, filed in court, show that there continues to be either virtual sealed indictment or a sealed indictment that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton bought, and the grand jury associated with that. And there's been an announcement that the Vault 7 publications, they have now expanded that grand jury to include our recent CIA publications.
Let's talk about what was dumped in March. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what was and what was not in that dump. But for Americans listening across the United States to this show, what was incontrovertibly demonstrated about what our intelligence agencies are able to easily surveil and listen in on, both when it comes to phones, home devices, etc.?
I think it's very important to not put unnecessary fear into people. I spent a lot of work covering the National Security Agency and the CIA for more than 15 years. And my own conclusion is these are really incompetent organizations. They have some good technical competency, which I guess happens when you throw $40 billion a year at a problem every year. But in terms of organizing that and applying it in the right way, at the right time, to the right person, they're very, very incompetent and making use of the information. So that's my first advice to people, that what our publications show is, yes, strong capacities, but on the other hand, extremely incompetent. So don't get too paranoid.
Okay, don't panic.
That said, there's been a kind of false narrative that's come up in the other direction, that Signal, which has been adopted by the Democratic Party almost universally, and is encrypting smartphones, can keep you secure. they definitely add a layer of security above using nothing at all. But our publications show that they target these phones to basically hack the phone before there's any encryption done. So it just goes around the encryption. It's not that they break the encryption; they don't even care about the encryption. They just go around it. So that's the new approach that the CIA is conducting in response to an increasing use of encryption. New news came out yesterday, and we thought this might happen. So as a result of us publishing details about documentation about how the CIA has built up this enormous fleet of hackers to rival the National Security Agency over the last decade, now antivirus companies are starting to see that particular viruses are in fact CIA viruses. So they're starting to attribute those. And yesterday, the US virus company Symantec, which is the
huge
biggest one, put out a press release that it had discovered CIA virus infections in particular incidents that it had investigated since 2011 across 16 countries, including in the United States, which is illegal under US law. And were these infections in terrorists? No, they were infections in telecoms, human rights organizations, the energy sector, aerospace, and finance. So you should understand to kind of, the CIA is a big, nasty organization. You know, in the 70s, it was caught conducting medical experiments against Americans, feeding them mental patients LSD, etc., seemingly as part of its experimentation for interrogation programs. And it has a culture of lying and doing things undercover. Now, you can understand that when they go overseas and they're, or trying to infiltrate some group, they need to lie and do things undercover. But then they also don't want there to be blowback against the president for ordering such information. So they conceal the chain of authority within the Central Intelligence Agency. And that produces a culture of cover-up and a culture of abuse. And inevitably that starts to backfire. And where allies of the United States people are attacked for political reasons, and people inside the United States are attacked, where enormous quantities of these hacking exploits are built up, giant arsenals, and then they lose control of them all because they don't have a system of proper accountability, because the whole institution is designed to avoid accountability for what it's doing.
And in Congress, which is obviously supposed to act as a check on the executive branch, and if it's behind closed door sessions, they're still supposed to be able to act as a check. But your argument is that because it's so big, like so much of the bureaucracy, that accountability becomes more and more difficult to put into place and to carry out. Is that right?
Well, you've got, the Gang of Four, the Gang of Eight in the Congress and the Senate Intelligence, House and Intelligence committees. These are busy politicians, and they're meant to oversee the activities of 100,000 intelligence community workers, and there's probably goes out to 500,000 if you include contractors. It's impossible. It's just absolutely impossible. And then there's bureaucratic capture. So in response to a lot of these abuses, you had the church committee in the 1970s, right. And you had extra, and the Senate and House Intelligence committees were set up on a permanent basis as a result. But if you're permanently interfacing with a powerful organization that has tens of thousands of workers and a lot of money sloshing around in its contracts, about 80% of the money is not spent by the intelligence services directly, it goes into contractors. And then those contractors funnel that money into campaign contributions. So these committees, which are meant to engage in oversight, are captured bureaucratic capture. It's a well-known phenomenon. If you're always dealing with the same people and you're not dealing with the critics of those people, then, human beings start to get close to those people that they operate with every day.
One of your big fans, Mr. Assange, Marco Rubio, has been beating the war drums on what's happening, of course, in Syria, saying Russia's complicit with the chemical attacks and a lot more.
Do we really want to be a country where foreign leaders or foreign intelligence agencies can blackmail our elected officials and say to them that unless you do what we want you to do, we're going to release emails from your campaign manager, your wife, your daughter, your son, and we're going to embarrass you. So unless you want to be embarrassed, you better do what we want you to do. Is that what we want? Because I'll tell you, that's what Vladimir Putin does. Plenty of material in which to line up and take on Secretary Clinton. I think this one is an invitation for chaos and havoc in the future.
Well, his point is, while you complain or you allege that CIA has all this power and all these abuses documented and so forth, now who has the power? If it's the hackers who could get into any communication, then it's just perpetual blackmail, extortion. So it's just a power shift to the hackers and the WikiLeaks from the political classes or deep state.
Well, Rubio raises an extremely important point, which is about those people who have access to extensive information can blackmail people. Mm-hmm. The National Security Agency intercepts more than 1.6 billion communications per day. It's SMSs, emails, etc. 1.6 billion per day. So the deep state within the United States has unparalleled ability to blackmail people, and that is what has been happening in the last 70-something days of the Trump administration. With those leaks coming out to the New York Times and elsewhere, that is those agencies using their exclusive access to information to beat the White House into line, saying, you've got to respect us, don't tread on our toes, and start doing what we say on the issues where we're invested. And now that's happened. As I said, I don't have an opinion about who is behind that attack, but I do have an opinion that at the moment they're allegations until evidence comes forward into the public.
Julian, we only about 30 seconds or so, but you get lots of information on a daily basis from a variety of sources. How long does it take you to go through the information you get to ensure that it's actually accurate and truthful versus a hoax? I'm sure a lot of people want to try to undermine the veracity and truthfulness of the information you put out.
Yeah, it's hard work to keep up a perfect record. So that takes days to up to a year, depending on what it is. And that's we hate it in the sense that if something is worth publishing, it's worth publishing now. And every second that you don't publish, you deny your readers and civilization more broadly the ability to learn from what you've revealed.
Do you have any regrets at all, Julian? Any regrets about WikiLeaks?
I don't think so. I mean, if you're running an organization which you have a lot of constraints, like how much money you have to pay staff, for example, that's a constraint that every organization has to deal with. By the way, we're tax deductible in the United States and in Europe. If you a lot of moves are kind of forced moves based upon how many resources you've got. So that determines how fast you can publish. We've kept a perfect record in the accuracy of our publications. We've kept a perfect record in never having revealed a source. So in the big principles of the organization, I think we're doing pretty well. I have a family and children, and obviously me being detained in a different country for 7 years without charge has seriously compromised
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but you've compromised your relationship with your family, obviously, and that's what you were getting at. We're out of time. We're going to go to a hard break. Julian Assange on the Laura Ingraham Show. We appreciate that.